In this video, I am gonna be talking about the things that I really had to accept and change in my life to give me the life that I have today. People who've known me for a while, way before I started our YouTube channel, they see how far I've come. A lot of them are amazed at my ability to do it when they knew how down I was. And a lot of people have reached out asking how I got through it, how I persevered and got to where I'm at today. And then you have people that met you during your season of success and growth and reaping the rewards of their hard work. And when they hear about my previous lives, my chapters before this one, it's like they're shocked that I couldn't have been that kind of woman in that kind of situation. So I wanted to do this video for all those people that dream of being in this position, that are going through something tough and hard, life-changing, and would like to know what are the key things they should implement in their life in order to get through it and to get to the space of full contentment and happiness and success. And so in this video, I'll be sharing with you the 10 things that I had to do to get the dream life that I wanted and have the things that I was desiring to have. But right off the bat, I want to say I'm not an expert, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor. I don't hold the answers to everything. This is purely my life. I'm sharing with you things that I've gone through that are pretty unbelievable things for a person to go through. And so I will only be speaking from personal experience, and if it helped me, it might help you. And that is the only approach I want you to see me have here while I share with you these things. So they're not in particular order, but I've kind of laid them out as I've journaled my entire life, that these really are the top 10 things that I had to do. The first one was to let go of my pride. Now, my background is, you might have heard me talk about it depending on how long you've been following me, but I had a pretty sheltered religious background. Not uncommon for the typical American family, born 80s and earlier, where it was very Christian. It was right after the huge Pentecostal movement in the 70s. And a lot of us kids born in the 80s and kind of had a bunch of zealous Christian fanatic tongue-speaking parents that were very strict and kind of were wanting to have the next generation of, just motivated Christians changing the world for the better. And sometimes that's when you get into crazy shit. Kenneth Copeland was just becoming famous around that time. Benny Hinn or whatever. Just a lot of these crazy pastors who just was brainwashing our parents. And if you're one of those kids born then I feel your pain. I know you. It's like we're kindred spirits here. It was hard, but take that kind of difficulty and kind of mentally exhausting upbringing and combine it with a Latino family. I was the only daughter, so my stepfather, who was my father for all purposes really, because my dad disappeared throughout my childhood, he was very strict. He was from Mexico, he's from Michoacan, he's from literally the jungles. He didn't have electricity or running water in his village. And it just started happening when I was a teenager in their village. So he comes from a very rural part of Mexico where things were very traditional and he was very strict. So on top of my fanatic mother who was into all these crazy name it and claim it movements of Christianity, combined with a very strict, kind of barbaric a dad who had this kind of very strict approach to parenting. So the combination was insane, and it was really hard to have that upbringing. And it left me with a lot of uncertainty, it left me with a lot of pride. When you're built up in that kind of home, speaking mainly of the fanatical Christian one, you really feel like you're better than the world in a sense, because you're expected to be perfect, to strive to be perfect, that, you know, don't sin, don't weaken like the sinners out there, you know. So you kind of get that the more perfect I am, the better I am. And that was literally stemming from wanting to please my parents. But because I didn't sleep with a boy, I was still a virgin. Because I had to be picky, because I didn't go hang out at these trashy places, that I was a better girl for it. And God looked at me more proudly than the skanky hoe next door. I had to really be humbled in order for my journey to even begin. I really had to be slapped around by God, humbled left and right, shown that I am no good, no better than the woman who just constantly needs male affection. I am no better than her. And it really had to take me through the ringer to get to that point where I could even begin to become the woman I am today. You really have to be humbled. Whether that's God doing that to you or yourself with your own choices, it needs to happen for transformation to even begin. You need to know that you're no better than anyone else, but the potential you have and the beauty that could come of someone so flawed and imperfect is amazing and worth it. You got to be humbled, and that's what I had to go through. That was the first thing to kick off my advancement into who I am and my success, was being completely flattened out, humbled, doing things that I never thought I would do. We as humans, no matter who you are capable of doing horrible things. Whatever definition of horrible you want to put it in. We, if brought to the same situations, if brought up in the same kind of lifestyles or homes, we are capable of being a next Hitler. That's what we really need to understand about human nature and who we are. And literally that had to be my first step, which brings me to my second one. You got to seek God through seeking yourself. God created mankind. God created all the living energies that we have here on earth. It's my personal belief. God created us with all these emotions and feelings that came directly from Him. The natural system that we have as humans, our thought process, our emotions, that's not like most of them are from the devil. I think when you get to anger is even of God, because God got angry. It's the actions that are where you get into sin and things that were not made by God. But the things we never really think about, like jealousy and anger, those were actually traits from God, because He made us in His image, right? So I had to go into deep shadow work, which brought me into the beginning boundaries of the darkness that I was brought up to look and shun from. Witchcraft or astrology or horoscopes or just demon, mystical energies, spiritual realm, even though that is in the Bible. But you're just not allowed to go there, because you're just playing with stuff that you would lose control over. And so when I started discovering shadow work, it brought me up to that place, that walled off city where I was taught never to touch or try to enter. And I really had to start allowing myself to let my guard down and see all there is, really, especially when you could sense there's energy there. Everything He created has energy. And He created a lot. So there's a lot of amazing God-blessed things in the world. And a lot of us are brought up to not look into that, to avoid it, like the plague, that it's not of God unless it's in the Bible, mentioned in the Bible, or that's it. That God's power stays in the Bible. Nothing else is of God if it's not in the Bible. And that is just simply not true. There's stories in the Bible that lead to bigger answers outside of it. Like things having energy and power of God. God blessing something that will put energy into it. The Old Testament is filled with things and items that are full of God's energy. And if humans were to touch it, it would kill them. Do you think that doesn't exist today? And I had to realize that that was a huge possibility. And when I started to focus on my shadow self and focus on energies, I really started to understand more. And that helped grow me and bring me to areas in my life where I could advance more than I ever thought possible. Being patient is the third thing. When you start your journey, you really have to be patient. You have to strive to be patient. And just telling yourself to be patient is not easy. But that's just something that I had to accept. And while I was doing the shadow work, that kind of naturally came into the next thing that I had to do. And it wasn't as hard once I really started to look inward and wanting to do the work. Having patience was just part of the process. The fourth thing was distracting myself with healthy distractions. Getting into working out, again, that's another thing that you weren't allowed to really dance around. Arrogance and being sexy and physically appealing, or showing yourself off, or focusing too much on your beauty, your outer looks, that was all shunned upon. But we, again, were designed by God. We're beautiful creatures. And there's a reason why we look upon each other as sometimes in awe of the other's beauty, because that's a natural thing. And yes, when sin entered the world, sin happens, but that doesn't take away the origins that of it being of God. I started to use that as a healthy distraction for myself, because that is work. It's like a hobby you do, and you really learn to enjoy it. The fifth thing that I had to do was I had to begin to start to care more about others than myself. Now, that was kind of easy to do for me in my situation because I had a daughter. I had married someone that I didn't really know at all, and we had a child together. So when I really started to fight for myself, change and try to find healing, it kind of made the journey harder in a sense, because I had a daughter, I had a life to think about other than my own. But the act of thinking more about someone else more than myself played a big part in my journey, because it really helps you get off of yourself, and it helps you think about another person maybe being exactly in the same boat as you are, and how they might be feeling, how they will get through it. And if it's a child, that's even more of an important thing, because they're a child, there's innocence there. So really getting off yourself plays a huge part, and that's why I made the list of top 10. The sixth thing kind of explains all I just said. I never settle for something. Don't get comfortable and just begin to settle in life. That is probably one of the hardest things a person will resist doing, because it's just easier that way, right? And a lot of us get so tired from life that we just we'll just put up with something and settle and just get comfortable with it, even though it's not good for us, it's not helping us grow, it's not going to get us anywhere better, but it's easier and it's less exhausting. I settled. I was in a situation when I was 20 out of desperation and just, what the fuck, why not? I ran off and got married to a stranger and made a horrible mistake, because that right there produced its own set of massive issues in my life that I walked into and I chose to do because it was the easiest choice at the time. I didn't want to fight for something else that I knew was better, and I just settled. No, I'm not taking anything away or insulting my ex. God knows we're all human. We were both very young, very immature, very stupid at the time, but we both made bad choices, and we both have to live with those bad choices, and we had to pay the consequences in our own way. And that's how I see it. When there's a kid involved, there's just a certain way you have to be. The seventh thing is, stop being afraid of confrontation and start to fight for what you're worth, to fight for yourself. I think a lot of people are just afraid to have that argument, to fight for that salary, because it gets uncomfortable, and you really have to get ready for a fight, whether that be a mental or verbal fight or discussion usually is not a full-blown fight, but in a sense you are fighting for yourself, which takes a lot of work and energy and a lot of uncomfortable situations, but it's so required. I had to start doing that. I've had so many jobs because when I was a single mom after the divorce, I started with nothing. I really started from the bottom. No work experience, no finished college. I was a college dropout at the time. I had no mommy to run home to and a grandma to watch my kid. I had no convenience, no help, nothing to be there for me. It was just my daughter and I in a new city starting over after being stalked and harassed by a sociopath. That was my life. And so I had to take that, and I really had to learn to fight for myself, fight for who I was, put in the work, value who I am so I can get to where I need to be for my daughter. And I could not settle. I just couldn't. And I had to fight for a salary because that ended up being what my daughter and I needed to survive. So getting comfortable was not an option. And that played a huge part in my success today because I didn't get comfortable. I wouldn't be here today if I did. Number 8, which kind of goes in from not being afraid of confrontation and fighting for yourself, and to my 8th point, learn to love yourself and learn to take care of yourself. You really have to value yourself, but valuing yourself means you're caring for yourself and giving yourself that self-care time of really looking inward and pampering yourself, spoil yourself. A lot of us, believe it or not, it's hard to even be selfish these days, which is crazy. But a lot of us women in particular, have a hard time being selfish because we're always brought up and taught and pushed in a world to push and fight. And we rarely ever really just want to pamper ourselves to take a break that we deserve. It's weird how our women's minds work, but really accepting that and putting myself first is huge, plays a huge part, and it still does today. For me to continue to sustain where I'm at and continue to find growth, I really have to put myself first, because if I'm not taken care of, if I'm not in a healthy spot, I won't be healthy for my kids who needs a healthy mom, or my husband who needs a healthy wife. I need to love myself so I know how to love other people. The 9th thing was to accept what is. That was probably one of the hardest ones, was accepting this is my life, accepting that there's certain things that I'll have empty to the day I die, closures that I'll never get. And with my chaotic life, that was a huge thing. There's a lot of things I'll never have closure for, and that closure for the time being is pretty much accepting what is. It took me 10 years to become the woman I am. 10 years, that's a decade, that's a long time to finally be where you're at, where you feel successful and that people are noticing. It took a lot of hell that required all those steps I've already just said. The accepting what is was one of the last things throughout the end of the decade that I finally mastered and accepted. My mother turned against me. My spiritual mother turned against me when I divorced my first husband. No one believed me. No one forgave me. No one cared to desire to think the best instead of just immediately thinking the worst. They didn't follow the actual definition of what love is that God explains in the Corinthians in the New Testament. They didn't show me love. No one did when I needed the most. And I had to accept that. Their neglect to even show basic love as a Christian, which is their duty, my entire family couldn't do. And because of that period of selfishness on their part, I had to go through even more hell as an individual than I otherwise would have had to have gone through. So I have things that I am dealing with today based on that simple choice of theirs. And a lot of them don't realize that simple choice that they chose to do, I'm still being affected by. They're not, but I am. Accepting what that is, and that they're never really truly going to understand what they did, and I'm still living it through it. I've had to accept that, as that's just the way it is. And a lot of that is forgiveness. You're forgiving someone who really doesn't know the impact of what they did, but you have to accept that, and you have to move on. Like my mother, she died thinking ill of me, and that is probably the hardest thing for me to accept. But I can't change that. She's gone now, and she'll never see this Shauna. She'll never see how far I've come, the amazing woman I've become, the success that I have. She'll never know me as this. She died knowing me as a failure, a single mom who divorced and was going through a crazy phase and trying to discover herself. But at that time, she was a bad girl. That's hard. And the fact that a lot of the other family members didn't help that, and if only cemented that as being what I'm faced with today. They'll never see that. They'll never own that. They'll never honestly understand what that feels like. And I've had to accept that. So accepting is literally choosing to forgive and move on. Something, yes, you know it, you'll never forget it, it's there, but when you think about it, all you're supposed to feel is just pain, but understanding. Not hatred, not anger, not resentment. Pain is okay to feel. Jesus felt pain. Jesus cried blood. He felt pain. Emotional pain before physical. It's not a wrong thing to feel. It's something that's okay and necessary sometimes. But you have to understand it, accept it. You can feel the pain. You can sometimes have it thought about. It's not a good place to be for very long, but that's kind of where you need to be in order to accept it. You've got to feel it to know what you're accepting and what you're just choosing to just realize is fact, and you can't do nothing about it, and because you can't do nothing about it, you got to move on. And the last thing, no brainer, never give up. I could not give up. I always had to keep hustling, but not in the bad way a hustling has become, where women feel like they have to prove themselves and just keep going instead of giving themselves grace and rest. Never giving up means that I'm not settling, which I mentioned earlier. I'm also not allowing myself to be defeated. So I'm not giving up. That mindset needs to be a daily thing you put on, just like many Christians will put on the full armor of God. I choose every day to never give up, to not give up. I have been fired twice throughout my decade of building my career from nothing. I've had a lot of drops and a lot of letdowns and a lot of disappointments and a lot of embarrassments, but I had to go through all of that to be the successful person I am today, who owns 2 businesses, who is an executive, who works for the state in all my various positions and situations. I'm respected, I'm pursued, I'm admired, and a lot of it. And I'm bringing in income more than I ever thought I could, but it's because I never give up. And there's a balance there that we all will eventually find, but waking up and choosing to work hard and do what's right in all those previous steps, that will all get you to success and happiness, because nothing feels as amazing as being contented. If you think about that, feeling content means you're happy with everything in life, what you have, where you're at, how you feel. You're content. That's like a dream for many of us that we never feel. Feeling content. Like, think about that. It's really something we all strive for that a lot of us don't even feel. We're constantly bickering or unhappy or thinking we need more. Being content, if you actually know what that feels like, it feels amazing. It's a combination of happiness, joy, understanding, peace, love. It's a combination of everything in that one little word and feeling of contentment. That is what the reward is. When you can get through everything with these tools, these 10 tools that I've shared, feeling content is the most beautiful thing in the world. It is what I mention on my homepage, on my website, where I will sit on my front porch in my beautiful farmhouse overlooking the amazing cascades and the shadow that happens when the sun hits our mountain behind our house just right, and it lays its shadow across the view of the cascades and the valleys before it. It is amazing to sit on my porch. I am content and so happy that I am here, that that's my view, that these are my kids, that this is my life, that I have that husband. There is no perfection in life. The kids are sometimes crazy animals. My husband's a dick half the time. Life is not perfect, but it's exactly where I want it to be, because I brought it here with God's help and my own and my fire. And so because of that, I'm happy and content, even when I'm a crazy case, a nutcase with messed up hair and a bitchy attitude and drops the F-bomb every once in a while. I'm a beautiful, content nut job. So I hope these things help you as well. Maybe you're already halfway there. Keep going, because the worst thing you can do when you're already in the midst of something is to fail, give up, or turn around. Got to keep going forward. You can even hunker down for a bit, but don't stay there. This life is possible. Feeling content is so possible. Just got to put in that work to get there. Please subscribe. Please share if you want to share some encouragement to someone else. Guaranteed, if you implement these things in your life, it will change your life for the better and give you the dreams that you have been wanting since a sheltered girl in a Christian fanatical Mexican household.